Hello and welcome to the easternKicks podcast, a regular magazine programme about East Asian film led by me, Andrew Heskins, founder and grandmaster of easternKicks.com, and James Mudge, our leading writer.
Hey-o.
Each episode we'll be taking a look at the latest films, news and festivals, often chatting to filmmakers and stars along the way. Hello and welcome to our latest show. This episode we're focusing on Tsui Hark and particularly his 2000 film Time and Tide, recently released by Eureka Entertainment, and we'll also be taking a look at his two US English language efforts that led up to it, Double Team and Knock Off. And to help us out, we have two regular contributors to easternKicks, Phillip O'Connor.
Hey guys.
And making his debut on the cast, our resident JCVD expert of fate of his own making, Fedor.
Hello everybody.
But first, it's time for that important question. What are you drinking this episode, James, if you could start off?
Yeah, I can start. I mean, I'm still in Scotland and it's Sunday afternoon, so I have a bottle of Glen Marnoch, which is a fine Highland whiskey, which I'd never heard of before, but was very kindly stocked by Aldi, so it wasn't very expensive. And I have a couple cans of Williams Brothers Belgian style IPA, which is 5.7%. So not bad. I'm sure you're going to pull out something stronger, as you quite often do. What have you got?
Let's see what we've got here. It's another Howling Hops. It's a deeper. It's 8%.
8%. Well,
it's a brew called Off Ramp.
Oh, very, very interesting, man.
How about you guys? Fedor, are you on anything this week?
Yeah, I'm a little bit less sophisticated. Just a basic pint can of Heineken. I drank all my nice beers this weekend already, so yeah.
No worries,
man.
Budget.
Phillip, how about you?
This will be the first time I'm actually drinking with you guys, because normally when we're doing these things, it's like I have a single malt whiskey, I have beer. What have you got? Tea. No, today I'm drinking Tuborg, because this was and you thought, Fedor, you thought you were at the very bottom of the rung. No, I can get lower. I can. It was the only thing in my fridge. I completely forgot that we were recording today when I was doing my shopping, and I was like, oh, I really must get beer because we're recording tomorrow. And then I was sitting there this morning going, I really should go out. No, I'm not going out. I'll just drink the Tuborg. It's fine. Tuborg's
fine, man.
Well, as we segue into our main feature, I mean, on a related note, there is a very bizarre bit of product placement that I remember from the very kind of beginning of it. There's a lot of Boddingtons in it, in Time and Tide.
Yes, very, very strange. Not personally one of my favourite beers, I guess. Maybe there was some mad push at that time to...
It was that sort of 90s thing, wasn't it? There was a big push on Boddington. It must have just got into the...
It's true. There's a few other countries as well that it went out to and stuff, and I don't know if it ever made a massive impact for obvious reasons. I mean, I would still drink it if I had to, but I wouldn't. I would choose Tuborg definitely over.
Was that Boddington's push? Was that the same time they were doing those weird ads where the girl was using the cream from the Boddingtons as hairstyle?
Might have been. Might have been right. I remember
mid to late 90s, wasn't it?
Jeez. That's all I remember of that beer. It was just like, wow, that's a weird ad.
Yeah. Because you're right. It was getting quite a push in the UK at that time either. Because even here, I guess most people weren't massively keen on a nice pint of bodies.
去邊度送你啊？
So let's chat about the feature then. Time and Tide from the year 2000. Phillip, if you can kind of give us a little précis of the plot.
Sure. So Time and Tide is a 2000 set Hong Kong produced film, as we said, by Tsui Hark, and it ostensibly tells the story of Nicholas Tsui's character, who Tyler. He's a young man who is trying to make ends meet in 2000 set Hong Kong. In the doing, he's doing a thankless bartender job where he comes into contact with Ajo, played by Cathy Tsui, who during a drunk session somehow ends up in bed with her and accidentally gets her pregnant. The twist here is, and I've said this in my review, that it's a completely weird twist. Ajo is a lesbian, and we have this immortal scene of her girlfriend, now ex-girlfriend, beating the hell out of Tyler. for having broken them up. So anyway, Tyler is out on his ear. He's trying to make ends meet. He's trying to support a girl who doesn't want anything to do with him. So he takes a job with his Uncle Ji, played by Anthony Wong, as a bodyguard. And in doing so, he tangles up with Jack and his wife, Ah Hui, played by Candy Lo. Jack is played by Wu Bai. And Jack seems to be a butcher, but we find out later on that he's anything but an average Joe. And the film
He's a butcher in the same way that Leon was a cleaner.
Yes,
Yeah,
that is exactly what we should be going for here. The film then descends into an all-out fight between Tyler and Jack's former associates from South America, who want money back from Jack, who he has stashed. And of course, Jack does not want to hand it back because, one, it's never actually quite fully explained as to why Jack doesn't want to hand them over the money, other than the fact that they're bad guys, which is a really strange place to go die on a hill. But anyway, that's what happens. And the film itself is an action-packed adventure through the now. I've spotted at least 3 places in the film where the area they're talking about has been completely demolished or rebuilt. So this is 2000 set Hong Kong. So the sections of working class Hong Kong get destroyed as the 2 groups battle it out for supremacy over this money.
The whole, I remember from watching it the first time, it feels like at least the last third, almost last half, is an almost continuous action sequence after action sequence.
Yeah,
done in a really great way. I mean, it's when I really enjoyed kind of returning to this film. It's one I remember seeing at the time. It was widely available. I think it was because it was released by Sony in the UK.
Sony Columbia.
Yeah, and I guess and we'll come back to this, but coming off the back of the American productions that he'd done, it had a reasonable budget behind it, and it had a reasonable release on DVD. It wasn't one of those Hong Kong Legends kind of more niche, kind of a thing. And but I just remember enjoying it, but actually I haven't watched it for probably a decade since I've actually watched Time and Tide. Probably more like about probably nearly 20 years. I expect, but I really enjoyed coming back to the film and actually just some of the characters and the kind of work and make the action make you kind of care about them. It's this kind of classic Hong Kong thing of these characters feel quite fully featured, from Nicholas Y's character, who is, I love the fact that he's not allowed to have a real gun, and he has to, at the best he's got a pellet gun. His uncle won't let him. His uncle played by Anthony Wong, and I think you said this when you reviewed it on easternKicks, Phillip. But that there is a lot to the background of this character, but that great way that you don't need it, and it doesn't. But you feel that they're quite. They have this kind of fully featured histories going on behind them, and you've got the classic thing of both Nicholas and Wu Bai being pop stars. Both of them have several songs on the soundtrack as well. They're really great in the roles. I love Wu Bai's character and the fact that there's this great bit where he's doing these costume changes with this kind of Velcro stuff, and it's all really, really nicely done, isn't it?
Yeah, it's
absolutely.
It's. I say in the review that Nicholas starts off the film very low key, and his character kind of builds up, and Wu Bai's character Jack starts the film as kind of average and then gets quieter and quieter. But as he does, the body count just keeps going up and up and up. I mean, it's just one of those things where less is more in Jack's case, and more is less in Tyler's case. And I did like that. I like the fact that Wu Bai he spends some of the film talking, but not enough that you could say that, he's explaining stuff to me. I don't need it explained to me. He just tells Tyler's character, Tyler, just enough to get him to the next scene, and no more than that, because he knows full well that if the young lad has too much information, he'll just blow something up,
Yeah, for sure. I think it's such a chaotic film, but it's one of those ones which actually, in that Hong Kong style, which manages to kind of pull that off, because the plot is, I don't know, for me, the plot is quite hard to follow in places unless you kind of just go with the flow. As it jumps.
Also, in a sense that you can go with the flow, that you don't really need to take too much in, and if you really just kind of watch the the action on screen, then it delivers.
100%, and it's in Hong Kong was. I mean, not always good at it. I mean, see most of Wong Jing's films, from the 90s, where where just nothing made sense, and you could either check in or check out. But with this one here, it just, I don't know. There's something sad about it as well. I mean, both like with the, as we've said, like locations not being there anymore. They just don't make this kind of film anymore. And coming at the time when it did come, there were so few ones like it after that and everything. So when you watch it again, it feels so old school. That's the thing which really, I don't know, I felt very nostalgic kind of watched it. Even though it's like hyper stylized. It's just so chaotic, the different visual technique.
There's the reasons about it, but I mean, I actually really quite like those very kind of random bits that were chucked in. Like, there's a bit where there's a chase scene going on and the camera swings around and actually goes to look through the other side of a washing machine. And it's utterly, it doesn't need it, but somehow it really gives something to the film. It's so weird that actually it really helps. In a way that elsewhere, some of the kind of place names on the titles are animated, and it tries to do all these kind of things with it. It's just all these things don't seem actually, they're not necessary, but they just give this extra flavour. I mean, in terms of cinematography, there are 3 cinematographers on there, including Herman Yao.
Yes, yeah. I didn't. When I was researching this as well, I didn't realise he'd done this, and he did Hark's 2001 Zoo Warriors as well. So obviously I knew Herman Yao did cinematography and stuff, but I didn't know he worked on it. But and having 3 of them involved is, quite possibly the reason for all these sort of weird stylistic shifts all the way through, which are then edited together very, very well. But I saw you also had
it doesn't feel messy. It somehow, even despite the different tones, it doesn't feel like they're different people.
Absolutely,
it's got the same, the pacing and style just really gels.
And I love the look of the film. I mean, both, you can see bits of Herman Yao in there. I hadn't heard of one of the guys, but then the other one was Ko Chiu Lam, who did stuff like Seventh Curse, Erotic Nightmare, Longest Night, which I think you can see some, kind of in this film.
Definitely. I mean, that's an underrated classic.
But it's so fantastic.
It's quite interesting. This kind of brings this action level to a certain, kind of what people. In some ways, it was bringing some of these ideas from American films, which we'll go back to, but it's still quite Hong Kong, and it's how it looks and feels.
Yeah,
and it was kind of delivering on what we wanted from Hong Kong action, and then it just didn't. As you say, it didn't continue. We had things like Infernal Affairs, which is something quite different.
Yeah.
Returns to sort of the Ringo Lam City on Fire kind of style of.
I would argue that Time and Tide kind of represents a kind of a fusion between the kind of Rennie Harlan, Michael Bay style of filmmaking, where it's very stylized.
Tony Scott as well, yeah.
The scenes where we're driving backwards with Nicholas at the wheel, or the scenes where it's the firefight between the South American gang and the police in South America, and then the final kind of the Kowloon train station. I've got this really weird vibe. It's only I was trying to articulate it in my head and I couldn't really do it very well, but you're after reminding me. It feels like the airport terminal scenes in Die Hard 2, where it's all very compact. The action is very directed, so we move towards bullet shots, we move away from explosions, and it's a very Hollywood kind of look. But then, as you said, Andrew, we then go to Infernal Affairs, and that's kind of like, that's going back to Martin Scorsese's kind of way of filmmaking, where it's the crime, it's the pressure, it's the drama, rather than action.
Yeah. I mean, this was coming kind of like post Matrix as well, which I think is, having its own influences from Hong Kong and stuff like that, and then so I think there's so many different kind of influences or reasons for the way Time and Tide looks the way it does, feels the way it does,
For me, watching it the first time last night, and by the way, I'm not old enough to feel nostalgic about any of this.
Zing!
Little youngster.
Burn! Oh my god.
So I'm coming into it as a complete blank slate. Phil, thank you for that plot summary earlier, because I now understand the plot a lot more than I did last night. And it didn't matter. It didn't matter to me because I was just so in love with the style. It was like the kind of film I'd just go head over heels watching in cinemas, because it just completely envelops you. The style, the constant invention, the constant, why bother with shot, reverse shot, when we can do this or that? Like, why bother with just shooting things the ordinary way when you can do it this way or that way? And that's what I really loved about it. It felt almost avant-garde or impressionistic at times, rather than a lot of action films. They do focus on some, unless outside of fantastical action films and fantasy ones like Wushu, it felt really, most action does tend to focus on realism to an extent, whereas that one just goes off into the ether and it becomes more shapes and movement rather than anything real.
I mean, it's really like he was trying to prove a few points here, I think, because and also that it does feel like it has quite a generous budget. The CGI doesn't feel like it's got a very generous budget, but in terms of the setups, the cinematography, or even just kind of going with some of these very kind of adventurous ideas in terms of just kind of flying past a washing machine or and all that kind of stuff. It's got a lot more in there than a lot of other films would have had the chance to be. I mean, I think the big comparison at this point is people like Benny Chan, who is also bringing in a lot of these American influences, things like Big Bullets, and still making them in a way that has this cross between the kind of Hollywood, Hong Kong kind of thing going on. But this has it does feel very much more polished than even Benny Chan's films have a chance to be. You can just feel that it's got that bigger budget behind what's going on.
Yeah.
In the commentary track on Eureka's release, there's a commentary track from Tsui Hark himself, and he does go into a lot of detail about, in certain scenes, like the ballroom scene where Tyler meets Jack for the first time. He wanted to shoot that whole scene in a verite style because he didn't want it to be a conventional action scene. And for the scenes where Tyler kind of romanticizes about his South American holiday where he will escape all of this madness, he said he did it in a kind of a surrealistic style because he wanted to show that it was an aspiration or a dream rather than the reality in which he found himself in.
Oh, okay.
So I found, like, with a lot of his comments on the track, he had a plan. Like, he knew what he was doing for each shot. So when you see it change from being, a standard kind of tracking shot in an action scene to, like you said, Andy, like the scene where it goes right through a laundromat, he's doing it because he can get away with it. He does talk about the scene where Tyler picks up Jack and his wife, and they're singing that song where they just start breaking the lyrics up between themselves. He was saying, if you notice in the shot, it's not a real car because I just passed right through the wheel and I can't do that in a real car. And we tried doing it in a real car and it didn't work. So we chopped up a car in half and just put it on the back of a flatbed lorry and just went, okay, do the scene. And he was able to go around with the camera. Again, this is a kind of a level of sophistication that, like you said, Andy, and James mentioned it, it'll just drop off in a couple of years. It'll just go right through the floor where they just won't try that anymore.
Yeah.
I think there's some other lovely moments in there as well. Like, this is wonderful bit where they've had this great big fight at the apartment and some guys that just ends up with them kind of basically falling down a back alleyway, and there's a guy from a restaurant who just kind of makes a quip about it. Also, like it's almost just something that happens every day.
There is that kind of randomness and chaos to it and everything, and there's even like chaos. Yeah, absolutely. And as I've said, like, this is one of those Hong Kong films which managed to absolutely kind of dance through all this madness in a completely incoherent but somehow still coherent, kind of way. But I mean, even like the lesbian angle, it's really odd. Like you said, Phil. But it doesn't. It never becomes like offensively odd, though.
Yeah, it's not chasing Amy.
Oh, Affleck. Don't say anything bad about Affleck. I mean, Affleck's
No, I mean, you know. But
no. You're absolutely though, and it's just, and that's probably just because it is just kind of like a throwaway thing. It's like a plot device. It's not really ever massively explored apart from some bits of non-offensive comedy, and then you've got the South American bad guys with some of the English chat. And
like I love how the scenes where they're talking in Cantonese and in some scenes in Mandarin, and it kind of does work. And then we have that extended scene where the gang are pretending to be bodyguard cover for the main gang leader, and they all speak perfect English, like stunningly perfect English. And I'm sitting there going, they're South American. How did they don't have accents at all?
You get all the bizarre chat about los cucarachas and cockroach city. Anytime you just hear los cucarachas, and they say it, and one of them starts speaking that sort of classic Hollywood drug boss one. Los cucarachas.
But there's a great quip about he's had his throat shot out, and he's one of the other guys, one of his henchmen goes, now he sounds like Rod Stewart.
Yeah, I saw that. And then he opened his mouth and was like,
But what doesn't make sense to me is it's kind of implied that the South American gang are from Brazil, because the character picks up on aspiring to go to Acaraju, which is a part of Brazil, and there's a whole shot of, I want to go to Brazil. And in Brazil, they speak Portuguese. So then to have the whole gang be speaking Spanish was just really confusing for me. My partner, she's Brazilian, and I had the film on while she was watching it. And I didn't have my headphones, so I'm partially deaf, and I didn't have the headphones on for the first 20 minutes or so, the film. So I could sense that they were speaking. I didn't have it on loud enough that I could tell if it was Spanish or Portuguese. But I could see that they weren't speaking Cantonese or Mandarin, so I started nudging her, going, "Hey, look, they're speaking Portuguese." And it's like, "No, they're not. No, they're not." I'm like, "Wait, hang on. No, you're right. It's Spanish."
How much of that was dubbed on afterwards then by those guys, the English speaking? There's a couple of parts where it definitely looks, dubbed.
Yeah.
But which just adds to the madness of those guys. I mean, they're hilarious, good value villains and everything. Anyway, so
I like the way that the one of the lead ones has that classic 90s action movie thing of all bad guys. There's going to be one that's got dreads.
Of course.
Yes. Yeah, because
I mean, even the Predator. Even the Predator had dreads. Yeah. So it's so kind of like late 80s, early 90s, isn't it?
Yeah, for sure.
One thing I didn't realize until I was listening to Tsui's commentary track, the film's original length, after he had kind of started to roughly cut it down, was 2 hours and 45 minutes long.
Oh, wow.
And he said that there were scenes that they had to chop out to make the runtime, and he said, he actually does mention in the commentary, he said, "You see that scene there? That guy has a bandage on his hand. Well, we had a whole scene that explained why he has a bandage on his hand, but we just had to cut it." So I would assume that a lot of the nuance between Kathy Tsui's character and Nicholas Tsai's character, the whole thing between the two of them, and she's a lesbian, but she slept with a guy, and yet we're not going to reference that again as to why that might be a problem. I would assume that in those extra hour of footage, there has to be scenes that kind of explain that, because the one downside I have about the film, it's the only thing I would put against it, is there's this wonderful back and forth between the two main characters, Kathy Tsui's character and Nicholas's character, and they have this wonderful thing going. It's this wonderful back and forth. He likes the fact that he's trying to help her, she hates his guts, and they eventually come to some sort of equilibrium. But there's no resolution to that relationship. Like, we were kind of talking about it before we were recording about the ending of that movie. And that ending of that movie is literally how I thought it was going to be, because I was like, we've got 40 seconds to go, no resolution. No resolution, that's grand, okay. We can move on now. But one thing I did pick up on the film is the two women, Candy Lo and Kathy Tsui, their kind of lot in the film is past remarkable, because, not spoiling the film for anyone, but Candy's pregnancy comes to a point in the film, near the end of the film, while bullets are flying all over the place, and yet Tsui makes this interesting thing of, he focuses on Kathy's character and her pregnancy for about 3/4 of the film, and then drops her and just goes, okay, she's going away now. And then he picks up Candy's character and goes, and now she's the important pregnant girl here. And he makes her a central point of the film. I found that quite interesting. It's like, while this is all going on, these two women are pregnant, so while you're all killing each other, this is still a problem. And I did like that about the film. It kind of went, like James was saying, there's so much in here. It's crammed together, and yet somehow he has the time to go, oh yeah, she was pregnant. I have to go back to that now. And it does say a lot about him as a filmmaker. Another filmmaker, an American filmmaker, would just have dropped it and just went, that's a plot convenience, and now I'm going to drop it. But he comes back to it and goes, actually, I found a way to make her delivery date a central point of the film.
Yeah, for sure. But, I mean,
and it definitely does. I mean, the great thing about, I mean, even though there could be more screen time for the women involved, you know, one thing that, and it's a very classically kind of a Hong Kong thing, I feel, but these aren't by any means defenseless women, and without spoilers, you find that out, towards the end, even after literally having a birthing scene, they're still in there not being defensive, which is always, I think, one of the kind of positive things of Hong Kong films.
For sure, yeah. I mean, I think a lot of it's down to the editing as well, because it was Marco Mack who edited it. Who, he'd worked with Hark on so much stuff as well, but he gets sometimes some stick just because as a director, some of the stuff he did. I don't think it was bad, but it's on the lower end of the scale, like The Peeping or like Haunted Office, Slim Till Dead, that kind of like slightly lower grade stuff. But as an editor, like he won lots of different awards. He was editing back from like the early 70s and stuff. So having him on board and having worked with Hark on loads of stuff before, Once Upon a Time in China, lots of stuff. So I think that is probably another kind of difference, maybe to the sort of Hollywood approach. That if you have the director and the editor know each other, trust each other, probably comes to Marco, because Marco Max, his own stuff as a director is very hyperactive, and it's a bit crazy as well. So dumping like a 3-hour thing probably on him and saying, right, we got to make this 2 hours, he's probably that's fine, just cut a few bits here, throw it together. But the editing must have been a very interesting process, for that one. So I think Marco Mack probably deserves some kind of recognition.
Kudos for that.
He must have had a lot of input into the process with Hark as well, I reckon.
Would you watch the 2-hour 45-minute director's cut? Do you think?
I would. Yeah, I would.
Yeah.
For sure.
I think this would be one occasion. I mean, on this program, we talk quite a lot about Korean movies and
we
the
do
classic 2-hour, 15, 20 minute. Whereas I think on this case, would be interesting to see what was left out, because from the point of view with some, when you get some of these like these special editions, or in the old days when you used to have the cut scenes on DVDs before they stopped bothering with that, you'd think, yeah, right, well, that was pretty pointless.
Yeah,
I don't think, because again, it's a kind of classic Hong Kong film. I don't think Tsui Hark would have filmed anything that wasn't necessary to a certain level,
or that he wanted. Yeah, I don't think
he didn't want in there.
Phillip.
So there wouldn't have been any crazy filler. So it actually would be a really interesting to see those bits.
I think so. I imagine it'd be very different.
It may even more so perhaps he kind of reinstalled in a sort of work print of the.
So I love that. I do love that sort of not even controlled chaos, but it's just the way it dances through the madness of the whole thing, everything. And if you started putting some explanations in, maybe you'd slow stuff down, or you would start to think about some of the stuff which doesn't make sense, which you don't. It's such a breathless film at the moment.
It's one of those. It's kind of like a Solomon's Choice kind of thing. If you added stuff in, it would explain stuff better. But the film works so well, and its current runtime, you're caught between I want to know more, but I don't want it spoiled.
Yeah, for sure. So that's why it would be so interesting to see it, because, I mean, no one's going to really care enough, and it's probably owned by some people who've lost the footage or something anyway, or Hark has thrown it away. So it's not something we're ever in any danger of. Danger of seeing, but I would, like Andy said, it's one of those rare occasions where I would actually be interested to see whether it's a director's cut or whoever's cut it is,
One thing that I noted when I was rewatching this morning, I was listening to it with the commentary track switched on. He has this wonderful bit at the very start of the film where, without spoiling it, Tyler and Ajo wake up together beside each other after spending the night together. He tells everyone in the commentary track that he had a whole scene planned out in that sequence where they were buck naked. But he said, I discovered two things on the day. One, Kathy Tsui was 17.
Ooh.
I couldn't do that. Two, her mother chose that day to visit the set. And he's like, not doing that.
probably for the best. Everything, but it's such a funny, playful scene, that one at the start there when they wake up and stuff. She goes and gets her. She gives him a good pistol whipping and stuff.
Yeah, and he's like, at this point, like, I love the line. She's got a gun in his face, and he said, all I know is I have my underpants on at the moment. That's all I know right now.
But again, I there's something about it which just doesn't come across as like offensive, like 20 years later and stuff like that, because he's just like, I was hammered, I can't remember a thing, I don't even really know who you are, what are you doing here, everything like that. Why are you blaming me? Did you drug me? It takes a situation which certainly I think now, like 20 years later, would be, I can't see many people going there. Filmmakers going there for that kind of thing, but in this, as well as like the lesbian angle and everything, I can't imagine anyone going there. But I mean, coming from our perspective, obviously, there might be other people who would have different readings of the film, which is totally fair enough. But it doesn't seem sleazy, offensive. It's just wacky in that kind of Hong Kong style,
It kind of feels like,
but not in Wong Jing style.
No, because like Wong would totally go for the sleazy angle of the whole thing.
Exactly.
Whereas Tsui kind of goes, okay, it happened. And
plot device. There we go. Move on.
Yeah. And let's just move on now.
Yeah, but it's just, and I think that's just how Hong Kongy the whole film is. I mean, it's that whole classic. You've got assassins, bodyguards, mercenaries, cops who don't really act like cops. All these like overly elaborate but somehow still senseless schemes. It's so that's what I love the most about watching it, and especially the sort of vague sadness of it being, 2000 and that kind of thing. I mean, it's, we'll move on to talking about, him in America and stuff, but the fact of it coming of him as he came back from America, the fact that it's, post, him making this kind of post handover, everything in there as well. There's something about it which kind of felt like a last hurrah for that kind of Hong Kong cinema, kind of. And there's, because there's been stuff after, but not much, very little.
Yeah, it almost feels like this is a palate cleanser for him after he got back from the United States. For
sure, and I guess we can move on to talk about his stuff in the States.
But before we do leave it, can we please talk about Anthony Wong, because he was just so good in this movie. It's a very small part, and he doesn't have a lot of material, but he uses it to such great effect.
100%, and it's not like one of his crazier performances or anything like that. But you're absolutely, man, it's really what he does so much with that character, which certainly in the version we see and everything like that, there's not many appearances.
There's a lot of nuance, and there's a lot of like I was saying before, that there is a history to this character. You can tell he's quite protective of the of Tyler. You can tell he's there's just so much to it, and actually Anthony Wong is as good in the roles where he's absolutely pared back as he is in the totally manic roles. Absolutely. And that's the thing that people, sometimes people forget, it's not, because he's so great in those,
It's, and as well, like, even in like 2000, that's still the period where he was making about 25 films a year. So that's not even an exaggeration. I'm not, I don't have it surprisingly, I don't have IMDb open in front of me, but I would guess he did over 20 in 2000. Because he was in other stuff with Nicholas Tsui around about then as well. So Gen X Cops must have been round about then as well.
Yeah.
Or Gen Y Cops.
Yeah.
Whichever. I get that mixed up, to be honest with you. But, you know,
I keep thinking that I've seen Gen Y Cops, and I keep thinking that I've seen it, and I'm like, no, I've seen Gen X Cops. But it doesn't really matter, does it?
One's got Paul Rudd.
Exactly. Exactly. I get very confused by it. But Anthony, he was switching with. That's right, fucking Paul Rudd. Jesus, I forgot about that. My God, I can even actually picture it now that you say it. But oh wow. But Anthony Wong, like, at the same time as this, he was making stuff like Raped by an Angel 4, the Rapers Union, where he was playing like the Hannibal Lecter rapist, advising all those young rapists how to do stuff. So he would imagine just like doing 20 films a year, switching between something. One day you're doing this, like as we said, like really surprisingly nuanced performance, and the next day you're doing something like that. You know, he is a fantastic actor. He's one of the most flexible actors with such a range. Like you said, I mean, I think Untold Story, he's genuinely, legitimately amazing in it. But stuff like Time and Tide as well, he's got so much of a, different kind of roles he can take on and give them that kind of undercurrent.
He's there in Infernal Affairs as well.
Yes, yeah.
Quite really nuanced kind of late.
Yeah, that's true. He's hardly in it. Yeah, but he's hardly in it. But he has such a central part.
Most important.
Absolutely,
parts of the film.
Yeah.
So should we move on to talking about where Tsui Hark was coming from when he made these films? That he literally just coming off the second of two films he'd done in the US.
Yeah.
With Fedor's favourite, Jean-Claude Van Damme.
Okay.
One of many Hong Kong directors to work with.
Yes.
JCVD.
Yeah.
Well, this is the thing, really. Like, Jean-Claude Van Damme, I've done a complete 180 on him because I've realised that he tees up so many, major Hong Kong directors for their American excursions. He tees up John Woo with Hard Target in 93. Yeah. He tees up with Ringo Lam, Maximum Risk in 96, and then Replicant in 2001, who's meant to do Wake of Death with him in 2004, which is a terrible film. But I can imagine a version of it with Ringo Lam that would have been really, really good. And he does two films with Tsui Hark, Double Team in 97 with Dennis Rodman and Mickey Rourke.
Which is a classic. Classic combination.
Yeah. And Knockoff in 98 with Rob Schneider and Paul Sabino from the Goodfellas. Obviously, absolutely logical casts. And so Jean-Claude gets a lot of stick, but he does this. He brings over these brilliant Hong Kong directors to do their American things. And, we can be snobby about these films. They're not as highly regarded, their American films, as they are their Hong Kong films. But they're still, compared to other American action films, I would say that the stuff put out by Wu, Lam, and Choi is pretty excellent. And people forget that of the major Western action stars of the 80s and 90s, Jean-Claude is one of the few that actually knew how to fight, that knew how to do martial arts. Stallone couldn't. Schwarzenegger couldn't. They knew how to deliver one-liners and look tough, but that's it. Chuck Norris, obviously, he could fight. Steven Seagal pretends to fight, but doesn't.
No, not always very well.
He's more interested in his blues band or whatever it is. Isn't he?
Yeah.
Also, he's really interested in hanging out in Eastern Europe for no apparent reason, and there's nothing whatsoever suspicious about that whatsoever.
I think he's now an honorary citizen of Serbia, which is, I'm an actual citizen of Serbia. I have no idea what he's done.
Do you feel proud? Are you going to have statues to him like we have statues of Mel Gibson in Scotland? You can have Steven Seagal statues.
I mean, I can only imagine what it's like to go breathlessly to your friends. Guys, the guy from Under Siege has got to be one of us.
He loves us so much that he's here. He's made us his home and his tax haven. Because nobody else wants him.
Those films that he does with the Hong Kong directors, they do actually bring something different out of him. Ringo Lam finds kind of... I almost feel embarrassed to say this, but a weird sadness and childlikeness to him. Like, in Replicant, he basically plays a clone who's a blank slate, and he really leans into that, and he uses his physicality quite a lot, and that's a brilliant performance.
Let him in, Bravo.
He's the nation's top counter-terrorist.
Delta 1, you're good to go.
But on his final mission...
Negative. It's not him.
He missed the target. Now, there's only one man who can put him back in the game.
Whoa, I bet that hurt.
That hurt.
I need merchandise, the best.
Sorry, I'm closed for the night.
You're open now.
A world-class arms dealer.
Did you open that?
Yeah.
With a flair for destruction.
I don't know, man.
I look at you, I see nothing but trouble.
What the hell? I kind of like trouble.
Their styles are different. Very different.
Offense gets the glory.
But defense wins the game.
But against an international conspiracy,
I need a partner.
I'm the man, baby.
they'll be at each other's side.
Yes! I know! Oh!
And in each other's face.
It's me.
2 films he did with Troy. So, Double Team is a bit of a mess. And that's why I like it. But you can sense that Troy is still struggling with how to deal with American filmmaking. And there's a lot of strictures on it. So the film was meant to be originally a script called The Colony, which was, I think, about a group of super assassins who, post-Cold War, have nowhere to go. So they end up in a colony. And from there, they kind of develop this kind of secret agent world, not too dissimilar from something like John Wick. Okay. And then it got turned into Double Team with Dennis Rodman turning up and doing basketball puns all the way through. And it's a really confusing, bizarre, all over the place film that's a lot of fun to watch but doesn't make any real sense. And you can sense that stylistically it looks great, but it's not quite as free-flowing and wild as you might expect it.
It was shot by Peter Powell, wasn't it? The guy who did like Crouching Tiger, everything.
Ah.
So I have no idea why or what. I fully admit I don't remember these films that much, but when I was researching it, that's one of the main things which surprised me. The note about that he would not have seen, would not have expected that.
I rewatched Double Team a couple of years ago and was on the Sony Movies channel, and I tuned in on the main channel to the scene where they're crouching behind a Pepsi vending machine or a
Coca-Cola vending machine.
Coca-Cola, yeah.
Better get it right.
Okay. And I just tuned into that and I was like, I really hope the +1 channel has this at the start, and it did. And I have to say, Fedor, you kind of made a reference to something earlier about like Ringo Lam's efforts. I have a lot more fun with Double Team than I do with Rush Hour with Jackie Chan and is it Chris Tucker. Yes, Rush Hour is more sophisticated. But Double Team is. I said sorry.
I think you're the first person in the history of the world to utter sophisticated and Rush Hour.
I need to state a caveat here. Yeah, it's sophisticated in terms of the complexity of the film's production value and its execution. It's better. It's better than Double Team's, but. Double Team is having way more fun, which is the point of the movie. I mean, it's supposed to be about these two characters who are completely incompatible with each other being mashed together in a crisis situation. And for my money, Double Team works better from that perspective than Rush Hour ever did. To the point where I kind of look at Rush Hour now and kind of go, ha, ha, and I've laughed at the 3 jokes that I'm supposed to laugh at. I go back to Double Team and I was like, this is great crack. This is brilliant. I'm going to stay here.
Yeah, I mean, there's a bit where Dennis Rodman parachutes in an inflatable basketball or something like that, and then afterwards he goes, now that's what I call hang time.
Oh my god! Lucky I don't remember that. I don't know. I'm not going to comment too much on that.
Hong Kong and the world are poised for one of the most historic moments of the closing century. The return of Hong Kong to Chinese rule after a century and a half as a British colony.
On the streets of Hong Kong, a war is raging between the criminals who rule the city and the terrorists who threaten the world. One man is caught in the middle. And he'll need all the help he can get.
She's a cop? You didn't tell me she was a cop.
Let's go! So you're a spy, huh?
We work for the government! We're CIA!
That's not a battery. That's a state-of-the-art explosive device. They can target anywhere they want. And they're gonna put these bombs into clock radios, stereos, even children's toys. And once this stuff gets shipped, there's a lot of innocent people gonna be in a lot of grave danger.
Knockoff, going to Knockoff, which is the film Troy made again with Jean-Claude in 98. I think that is a secret masterpiece. And I'm going to defend myself on. Watching Time and Tide now, you can see the links between Knockoff and Time and Tide. Both of them have this view, really kind of, excuse my pronunciation, vertiginous view of the city.
Okay.
It's this really kind of 3D, go everywhere, be everywhere view of Hong Kong. And it's like he's just exploding stylistically, trying to shoot everywhere, everything. And one of the things that you see a lot in Time and Tide, editing-wise, in the action scenes, is he puts these sort of breaks in an action. So, say there's a bullet being fired, and he does that digital effect thing where we zoom into the barrel of the gun, we see the bullet being fired, and it kind of makes the action very staccato. It's sort of like this sudden, almost abstract break in the middle of the action. And he does something very similar in Knockoff, where he finds ways to sort of zoom in on a sniper barrel, or where there's a bit where Jean-Claude Van Damme is doing a rickshaw race in a Knockoff trainers. And the trainers are falling apart. And as they fall apart, Choi keeps zooming in on them and using digital effects to show how they're snapping and falling apart. And it's just a really strange and interesting and brilliant way of showing something happen. And Knockoff as well, the film is basically set around the handover of Hong Kong in 97, and for those of you that don't know the plot, I'll do my best to recount it because I don't understand it either. Jean-Claude and Rob Schneider are two knockoff merchants selling fake designer jeans in Hong Kong, and they get embroiled in some kind of plan to build nanobombs that can fit in as the button of a jean, that are then going to be exported to America and used to hold the US to ransom. I think that's what happens. I think that's the plot.
But it doesn't probably matter too much.
No, but
I expect
probably.
I think you put more effort into explaining the plot than the filmmakers ever did.
Yeah, absolutely. But okay, so the script is written by Stephen E. De Souza, who also did
the documentarian who filmed Street Fighter. I mean, Street Fighter is a documentary. We all know it's about the fall of Shadow Lu.
Yes.
What's wrong with you all?
But the script is just basically a clothesline for these random events. But Troy finds ways to comment on and sort of bring in these ideas about Hong Kong's handover, about colonization, about identity mix-ups and so on, because every single character in that film is a knockoff. It's kind of it's a bit literal, but every single character is pretending to be someone else. And the film then brings in, the handover of Hong Kong using basically a bunch of Western actors who are pretending to be, Americans, Russian, CIA, sort of fighting for influence of Hong Kong, for influence of Hong Kong's knockoff fake merchandise. And you realise on one level, it's a really dumb action film, which makes no sense. And on the other level, Tsui is there in the background going, actually, this is all about fake identities and who we are and what being a Hong Konger means at all. Are you just someone else's colony, or do you have your own identity that we can put forward, that we can prioritize, that we can promote and bring to the world?
Wow.
So that's my thinking on the film. Sort of a bit all over the place, but that's how I see it, basically.
No, that's yeah. I mean, I haven't watched it for a while, but the thing I remember about it more was that it did feel a bit more like it was his film rather than, I mean, say, compared to the other one, because he had a lot of his own people working on it as well. Yeah. Obviously, with some of the stuff, because it was edited by Mark O'Mac again, who did Time and Tide, and it was shot by Arthur Wong, who he'd worked with a bunch of times, everything. So it is probably going to be a lot closer to his own kind of, what he, maybe what he wanted to do. And it's not, I don't think it's technically a co-production, right? But it does feel more like, he would have had more input into it compared to, But the weirdest thing about it, which I didn't know when I was looking into it, was that Leslie Chung's in it.
Wow.
Very, very, very briefly, apparently. If IMDb and other places are correct, he has a bizarre camera. I mean, there's a lot of Michael Wong's in it and everything, which I remembered. But when I was looking into it again, Leslie Chung's certainly credited as being in it in a very, very small background type role. I have no idea. I don't know. It's not something we can go into here properly, but it's just interesting to know how much of it was seen as a, sort of more Hong Kong production and stuff. Because even even beyond some of the regular guys he worked with on it, who he worked with Hong Kong, the producers, he had Nan Sung was producing it as well, and it's a really, really interesting crew list for it, that's why I'm surprised it doesn't seem so much like it was like a proper co-production. You know? So it is a film which I haven't seen it for years, but genuinely seems like there might be an interesting production story to it.
Yeah, from what I understand, it was certainly a bit of an all-over-the-place production. I know some of the stunts went badly wrong.
Oh, no.
It might make an interesting comparison with The Master, which he did about 10... Because that's a film... It's a Hong Kong production. It's Golden Harvest, but it's mostly shot in LA.
Yeah. True.
Yeah. I don't know if you want to call The Master an American film. It isn't really, but it is Tsui and the crew going to America and working with American crews. And
which was quite common around that, particularly around the sort of late 80s, early 90s. There were quite a few, like Jackie Chan, Rumble in the Bronx, and that sort of era. There was, I think, an attempt to try and take Hong Kong filmmakers to America. You'd probably end up with an English dubbed version of those films that were probably quite terrible.
But it kind of, the benchmark for that kind of thing was like the 70s with Bruce Lee. I mean, he got to film in the Coliseum for Return of the Dragon, and that's the benchmark for kind of a Hong Kong international production. Like, you can't get any bigger than that.
I'm just going to step in and go and be very the actor that plays Garth Marenghi and do a very Office thing, but Way of the Dragon.
It's like Way of the Dragon.
Yes, of course. Chuck Norris, was he? I didn't know that. No, I'd never heard of that. Wow, is that a new one? Great scene, man. Great scene. Great reference.
Return of the Dragon, is that like the... Am I misremembering that? Is that like the American title for the movie? Because I can't remember.
It would be funny if Garth Marenghi was messing things up because he got the... Oh, brilliant.
Oh, my God.
But I think one of the interesting things about these films as well, I mean, both, because I'm not a massive fan of either of these two films by Hark. Just in terms of the casting, whether we have Dennis Rodman, then we have Rob Schneider. it's just, if there'd been more control over the casting and stuff like, I mean, like, putting Van Damme aside, I'm not a massive fan, but you're right, he was like genuinely a talented fighter and stuff, like, no retreat, no surrender and stuff. But for these films, if they'd had better casting, because this is kind of like Dennis
I'm
Rodman
sorry,
was,
can you improve on
casting.
Dennis Rodman?
I'm not even, put it this way, I'm not even going to try, because I'm not sure where
I think he's better than Michael Jordan in Space Jam. If that's a benchmark.
I don't know.
It's a benchmark.
That's controversial.
It's a benchmark of sorts.
I quite like Space Jam. Not because of Michael Jordan necessarily, but I'm not against him. But you know what I mean, though, like, because he was given these action films to do and stuff like that, and Van Damme is legitimate action star, legitimate martial artist and stuff, but then getting thrown in with these like random sort of stunt casting co-stars, like Rob Schneider is just, apart from like Juice Bigelow, which is the bomb, he's quite annoying in most stuff. And he's Dennis Rodman. If he didn't have these, could he have produced more sort of legitimately, great action films in America? I mean,
I would argue that in Double Team, Rodman kind of recognizes that this is his big action moment, and like he does give it, like for all of our stick about him in the film, he does give it his all. I mean, he genuinely is bringing. I know he's a basketball star, but he's bringing his A game as best as he can.
Well, he does. There's a few scenes where he does get to fight. It's quite it's very wrestling heavy, which works with him because he did actually do some wrestling as well. He decided a few times during his basketball career, I'm bored with this. I'm going to go to Las Vegas and do some wrestling. And he did. Fair you can see some of that technique appearing in Double Team. He's massive, obviously. Like, he's twice the size of everyone around him. So it's really easy for him to just pick up other actors and throw them around. So that's quite fun to see. He doesn't get to do it much, but...
I don't know, but if they had something like, I don't know, something like Wesley Snipes, who was a great sort of action star around that time as well. That's... If you'd had like proper, I don't know, non-stunt casting in these films, then, I don't know, you might have ended up with actually proper films. Because it's not, I'm not a Van Damme fan, but it's not his fault. I think these films don't have the reputation. I think it's because of the co-stars in the films, which is unfair for Hark. I mean, I'm not, I haven't read any interviews with Hark about this kind of stuff. Obviously, he made a decision to go back to Hong Kong and stuff, and to make films there again. I don't know. It would just be interesting to know more about that kind of casting process. Not that we can get into it here and stuff, because I think for a lot of people that's what delegitimizes these films, is seeing that Dennis Rodman's in it, seeing that Rob Schneider's playing off him and everything.
I would argue that kind of Tsui, of all of the Hong Kong filmmakers who went to Hollywood in the 90s, he was the one who kind of knew the road had run out beneath him, and he bailed after 2 films, whereas John Woo, he started off so strong, and by the end, I can't even remember the damn title of the movie. It's the one with Ben Affleck in it.
Payback?
I'm not looking at it. Someone has to remember it.
It is that forgettable that no one can remember the damn title. Whereas, like, Tsui kind of got 2 movies, and it was the law of diminishing returns, and he bailed, and he was done. Woo just kept on going and didn't stop when he should have. I mean, I remember being in the cinema, like we were talking about this being made in 2000. I was sitting in the cinema watching Mission Impossible 2, and everyone in the audience burst out laughing when Tom Cruise pivots on one wheel on a bike and fires a gun.
I'm sorry, but Mission Impossible 2 is, along with the first one, the best of the series.
Well, that is damning. That's damning with faint praise, but there
I mean, got a message for you, Tom Cruise. A message from Xenu.
Even when they pulled poor Simon Pegg into that, mess, and then even then, it's just like no.
I'm sure that Simon's getting some bank to forget him.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. When I say pulled in, I mean an attempt to add quality to it, which for me they just blur into one. It might as well be like the Fast and those Furious, and everything. They just all
on a completely unrelated tangential note, myself and my father watched the last 4 Mission Impossible films, and at some point he turned to me and said, Which one are we watching again?
Because they're all. I think that's fair.
A very fair point.
And like you say with Hark and stuff. I mean, he got out where he's like John Woo. He's not. I don't think his career's ever massively recovered from all that. Either.
I think that
Red Cliff is great.
We should kind of talk about that just very kind of briefly, and because that's another big kind of discussion.
Yes, yeah.
In terms of Tsui, basically going, you know what, I'm not massively bothered about America anymore. I think there was Black Mask 2 is one of the films that's kind of oriented towards an American market, but he's reading what's going on and going, forget this, I'm going to go for mainland China. Yeah, and that's really where his career goes from the early noughties.
The ultimate exponential of that is the Detective D series. That is a series of films that is entirely cultivated and designed to appeal to a mainland Chinese audience.
Didn't Tsui actually study in America as well?
Yes.
So I don't know about Ringo or John Woo, but that I don't know if they had any connection to America before going to America. But it sort of would theoretically at least position Tsui to be in a better position. And he decided against that.
You would have thought that if he wanted to, Tsui could have just stuck with it and made it work. And maybe he felt that it would have, for various reasons. I think this is the kind of conversation, what happened? Maybe it was that for various reasons it didn't work out and he just didn't like what he was doing.
But it's such an interesting timing as well. With just I don't know. I mentioned The Matrix before. You would think that after The Matrix, with you have more Ping and stuff like that involved in it, and after that, there was that's kind of I guess as well because I was not young but relatively young then, and there was like a big upsurge in interest in that kind of stuff because The Matrix was quite recognized as having like a Hong Kong style. In that way. So, but Hark, these two films Hark did were just before that. So if he'd been like a couple of years later, I don't know. It would be very interesting to have that chat with him over a drink.
It was part of at that point, I think there was also, I feel like it kind of burnt out very quickly. The focus began shifting towards South Korea.
The Ring was the same time. I think that's when we went into our our old our friendly long-haired Asian ghosts and everything, which horror films being cheaper to produce and less risk really sort of took over. So you're right, it was not like a long phenomenon, but he might have squeezed one or two films more out of it, for better or worse. I think his career didn't really go, well, put it nicely, I don't think it went uphill necessarily afterwards. Other stuff he's done after he went back, and I think a lot of even like the Detective D films, they're pretty good films and stuff. But they do have this weird mix of like bits of his old Hong Kong style, very mainland friendly. I'm going to say it in a nice way.
Yes.
But they still have that kind of like Hollywood, but essentially like lazy Spielberg kind of feel to it. Roger Ebert described him as like the Roger Corman of Asia, which is probably. I was quite surprised at that. That sounds a bit.
That's
kind of
I feel that's a very unfair.
Right. Exactly. It's a strange one to say. I calling him lazy Spielberg is after 2000 is already a bit mean-spirited.
I would argue that we already have a lazy Spielberg. His name is J.J. Abrams. We don't need another lazy Spielberg.
Jabrahams, Mr. Lens Flare, everything.
Yeah.
Like one day someone's going to tell me to fix that camera. Oh, right, the lens doesn't flare anymore. My God, now what? I agree. No, I agree with you. But I'm not a massive fan of his later stuff. I don't mind the Detective D films.
I think the strongest stuff he's done this.
Was it Missing?
This kind of last decade or so. Apart
Triangle, Seven Swords. I wasn't. Tiger Mountain.
The TV series, didn't it?
If anything, his output has increased since Time and Tide. He's produced. I know that he's been going since the late 70s, early 80s, but the output in terms of the amount of productions he can get done has kind of gone up exponentially. But again, it's one of those things where he's kind of read the writing on the wall. He knows what product he's making now, and he doesn't. I'm not going to say he's come to terms with it, but he accepts the fact that this is the product he's going to make.
It's so depressing, though, because you have a filmmaker. This is a guy who did Zoo Warriors, all this crazy stuff, and now the main, the sort of mainland China kind of influence. There's no room for that creativity anymore.
Yeah, I mean, he's doing like things like the taking of Tiger Mountain, which is basically the Chinese army succeeded.
Exactly.
So it's like it's great.
It's just it's really a shame, and I think even just commercially, you get to a level like him where he's go back to like 2000, like obviously one of Asia's biggest filmmakers. It's not that he's returning to Hong Kong in great triumph after the huge successes of Knock Off and Double Team, but he's a really big name and stuff, and he's still making films which are relatively successful, even in the West, are getting released. Back catalogue is beyond compare and everything, and then Hong Kong cinema from 2000 starts to die, kind of. And we get the few like The Infernal Affairs, which are great films, not so much the mainland version, but you know what I mean though. It's when you see his later output, there's no way he's ever going to be able to go back to doing that stuff. This kind of like the kind of wacky creative freedom to throw stuff in there chaotically, to bring in his man Marco Mack and just let's just do this, let's throw all this stuff in there, man. Those days are just so gone. And his career, it's hard not to see 2000 and Time and Tide as that kind of line in the sun.
There is like a melancholic, like a sense of an elegy about that film almost.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I completely agree with you. And that's, for us old fellas talking about this nostalgia for it and stuff. Genuinely, watching it, and I watched it today just before this cast, it's totally fresh in my mind. And I'm not going to say sad because, I'm too manly to say that. But there was like, there was that nostalgia for something. This kind of film will not be made again.
Yeah.
But it's kind of like I don't want to add to the depression. I don't want to add to the depression, but it kind of like it's not so much an indictment of the Hong Kong film industry now, but like the fact that one of the most successful Hong Kong filmmakers ever. Yeah. Like whatever you want to say about the content of his films, but he was the most successful Hong Kong filmmaker. If he can't find a way of doing self-expression, then there's just no hope for any of them.
It's not even just a censorship thing; it's a commercial thing. Like if these films there's no point in making films in Hong Kong which can't be released in mainland China. You're not going to get funding for it. You're not going to get financing. You're not going to get a major release. Yeah,
I mean, but contrast that to the career of Wong Kar-wai. We're not going to go into Wong Kar-wai in great detail, but he's the opposite end of the scale. He's like, I make avant-garde films. And I'm going to keep making avant-garde films. And the great thing about me is people outside of Hong Kong are going to keep paying for my movies.
That's the big difference, isn't it? Like he's, Cannes' darling. When he can deliver a film on time. I mean, no, actually, he doesn't even need to anymore because they know he'll do a different version of it like 5 years later. Yeah. So
I mean, he doesn't have the kind of the compactness and the kind of neurotic nature of it, but he's basically become Hong Kong's version of Stanley Kubrick. He'll pump out his opus film when he's damn well good and ready.
No, absolutely. And Tsui Hark, like whether it's this mixture of like commercial reasons or artistic reasons, because he is a commercial director. The stuff he makes is we'll go back to the kind of Spielberg-y type stuff. He's making commercial like fantasy films. But most of the time, and there's no room for. I
know we were taking the piss out of him earlier on by calling him like Steven Spielberg, but if you think about it, right, Spielberg has had almost an identical career to Tsui. I mean, he started off big. He did all of these amazing blockbusters. He had so much innovation built into his films that he kind of got to the 90s and he hit this malaise where he was just like, I'll just make anything I feel like. And the amount of time between his projects stretched out.
I'm not going to jump into
No, I don't mean that.
I'm not going to jump into it too much, man.
Yeah, but I was kind of like, I was talking to a friend of mine on Facebook, and I said, Spielberg is he's gone through his genre list. I want to do a war film, I want to do a science fiction film, and now he's getting to his musical, he's doing West Side Story. For me, Tsui is kind of doing the same thing. He's working his way through his genre book. I mean, one thing about the man is he loves cinema. He loves every kind of cinema.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, completely agree.
Yeah, okay.
That makes it even more sad.
Yeah, but kind of like, okay, we're kind of sad that he's hit the malaise of his career, but he's done literally everything you can think of in Hong Kong cinema. So at this stage, even if we didn't have the problem of, we have the double component of censorship and also the fact that you can't make a film in Hong Kong anymore without a mainland audience in mind. At this stage, even if there hadn't have been those components, he would still be on looking down the cliff going down, because he's done everything he could possibly do. I mean, the only thing I think he hasn't done yet is the big science fiction epic movie. And that's like, and after seeing some of the efforts in Hong Kong and China over the last couple of years, I'm happy that he's not touched that.
No. I mean, I understand what you mean, but at the same time, like, I think there's still either room for innovation, or, you know, I would say Spielberg's he's prematurely aged and gone into his Clint Eastwood phase. Just doing that. But Hark could do that, but he's not. He's still churning out kind of like what should be like popcorn fare, which, to be honest, like, audiences in China don't care about. These are the kind of things which he's putting out films which are similar to stuff which is being made by some guy who's, you know, just graduated from Beijing Film Academy. No, that's the problem.
It's Spielberg strange because he's switching between those big blockbusters like Ready Player One or a musical, and then doing stuff like The Post.
Yes.
Where he's just been this kind of very Hollywood liberal message films.
Frank Capra, kind of Tom Hanks in that.
Yeah,
for sure. Absolutely.
I'm more interested in those films.
You can imagine that Joy could be doing that. And,
he could, the guy's a great filmmaker.
He'd have the budget to be able to indulge these if there weren't other reasons why.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I mean, Taking of Tiger Mountain, and he's doing another one, the Battle
of Lake
something,
Lake Changjin.
Sounds like it, but it's just, I don't know, I'd put it this way, I don't hold out. It's sad that now, like, if I see his name attached to a film, I don't necessarily think...
I'm going to rush out and watch it.
Yeah, exactly, which is sad, but... I don't know. I think it might be. It's a weird co-production, that new one as well. I did read about it a while back. I had no idea what its status is, but nothing about it grabbed me.
I wouldn't worry. I mean, I would assume the last batch of his films will soon be in the buy two get one free in yesasia.com. So, you know, it's okay.
The popcorn night $8.99 type.
Yeah.
There you go. That's showing our age as well. Like Yes Asia popcorn night, where you get one dreadful free film. Like, you know, usually a Korean film. You know, a Hong Kong version of a Korean film. Sorry, whenever you get it and you suddenly realize, wait, this is terrible. It doesn't have proper subtitles.
Oh wait, now I know why it was free.
But it's a shame. I would love to see Tsui Hark come back to his stuff, but I don't. Post 2000, I'd say the same about many other Hong Kong directors. And Johnny To is probably the only one who still managed to really still sort of balance the mainland with stuff. And I mean, Tsui Hark's...
He's struggling.
He's struggling. And I think the Detective D films they were such big hits, and then the Young Detective D series and stuff. It's a shame that, you know, they didn't get good releases in the UK and stuff, but they were very popular across Asia. So given that, you're not going to necessarily see him... There's no reason, like you said, there's no reason for him to take risks now and stuff. Even if he could get the budget for stuff.
Having said that, we can all recommend that you do go out and see Time and Tide.
Definitely.
A last hurrah.
Yes, definitely.
It's available now on UK Blu-ray from Eureka Entertainment as part of their Eureka Classics range. Now, don't really want to get into this right now, but I'm not sure why Johnny To is seen as a master of cinema and Tsui is just in the classics.
Fair point. Yes.
But, well, you know, we might come on to a future podcast. Double Team and Knockoff are available on Blu-ray from 88 Films. Now we come on to easternKicks. I think, James, you might have a few picks for us to chat over.
I have quite a few, to be honest, which I will talk through efficiently. Everything, as usual, like correct at time of recording today. Next week or whenever this gets released might be different. But on the Netflix, you know, I just checked out The Girl and the Gun, which is by Ray Red, who's the cousin of Mikhail Red. Worked on most of his stuff. You know, some one of the best. You know, Filipino filmmakers for sure, and it's a strange one. I can't say too much about it because it's pitched certainly on Netflix as being like a female revenge film about somebody who gets pushed too far, finds a gun, and goes off on a rampage. But it changes completely halfway through the film, in a much more interesting way, and it's a really It's a really good film about kind of like the grim side of society in the Philippines. Less than 80 minutes. That's all. Wow. Even just for that, I could have said that at the start and given it 5 stars. But it's really good. I mean, Netflix has most of his films, and she's worked on all of his films. But this is really worth checking out. It's not massively different from his stuff, but really would check that out. Malaysian film, Raw. Like ROH, I'm not sure how to pronounce it. It's just been added. It's a horror one from Malaysia, which is quite rare. Apart from back in the old days of like Gong Tao films and stuff, but it's another horror one. It's more on the indie side, like creepy kids in the woods. It's like that. It's not quite the kind of Indonesian folklore type stuff. It's a bit different to that, but it was an entry for the Oscars from Malaysia, and again, less than 1 hour 20. So there you go, 100% recommend it. It's a very good film. It's definitely worth checking. Taiwan Ghost Lab on Netflix. It's by the guy who did a lot of the stuff on like the Phobia films, or Phobia, or however you pronounce it. You know, when we thought Thai horror was going to be the next big thing. I haven't watched it yet because it looks too long. But the guy, he also worked on The Girl from Nowhere, which, as I've said before, it's like a couple of doctors who tried to do a scientific experiment to prove the existence of ghosts. Like a couple of sort of very nice, good-looking sort of boy band-looking doctors, I would say. You also have the Carmelia Sisters from Vietnam, which is apparently weirdly part 5 in a hugely successful series, which I'm not going to watch the one on Netflix because it's part 5, and I don't have access to the part 4. It seems like another one, sort of like a luxury life, living in the palace, but having like a lot of troubles and dramas and secrets and stuff. So it's not really my kind of thing anyway. And not necessarily my kind of thing also, but for anime fans, they've got the Mobile Suit Gundam. The first 4 films are landing in mid-June, which I believe is kind of a big deal. They're the ones from like the early 80s and stuff, the film version. So apparently it might be interesting to check out just because it is proper old school anime, not kind of like anime. Flash of the Panties anime. So I might check that out, you know. And we've got the Rurouni Kenshin films landing soon as well. For the randomness of Amazon, again, adding a bunch of Korean stuff, like The Singer, which is another one of these ones from 2020 when they were doing all the Pansori stuff and everything. So another one of those, apparently quite good. I haven't seen it. Snakes and Earrings, I found randomly, Japanese film. It's from a while back, like 2008, but it's based on I've only read the book, which is a very good book about kind of angst and a lot of very, very extreme body modification. And it's kind of like that Japanese, at that period, they were still going through that kind of like post-Battle Royale, very, very popular urban angst for disaffected youth and stuff. But there's a lot of split tongues and things to your nethers, shall we say. It's a really, but the book was it's a really good book. It's very short and it's very, very popular, but it was kind of hailed as being, because it was written by like a really, really young author, and she did a great job with it. I mean, I've just read the translation, but I'm surprised it's adapted as a film. I can't imagine it has everything still in it, but I'm going to watch that. And then Hysteric Betty, a new Japanese one added. I'm just going to read what it says on Amazon. Girls, ! Idols, nudie models, photographers, jealousy and betrayal due to a desire for approval swept away, and the days go by unsuccessfully. But it's good. No, I'm bringing this up because it's got like a really sleazy, gory cover and stuff. But then when I looked into it, and it's a new film, it's a recent one. I read into it, and in other places it's said to be like, this is a film about female liberation, and it's actually a proper film and stuff. So we're new, and it's nudie, like spelled like NUDIE, nudie model ! So I'm not sure if it's a fair description or not, but they kind of had me at photographers ! So I'm going to check that out. But
that kind of feels like in the same way that, you know, Naked Weapon by Wong Jing is a secretly a feminist film.
Yes, but Naked Weapon when there's no nakedness.
Yes.
It's just, I don't know. It's a shame. It is very false advertising, which, in retrospect, seeing Wong Jing's name attached to something shouldn't really surprise you.
So I don't know. I mean, Fedor or Phillip, if you've got any picks of your own to.
Yeah.
Fedor, you go first if you have anything.
I don't, but I will tell you this. We mentioned earlier The Ring, and I remember. So I just moved into a new house, and the people that lived here beforehand lived here for 49 years. I went into the attic. Went into the attic today, and I found a child's mattress and a box of VHS tapes.
Oh man, that's proper. What's that?
Is there a video player?
Not that I've seen. Not that I've seen yet.
Oh my God! Trouble is,
that's legit.
I'm sorry. That's going to be worse than some long-haired. Dark-haired lady coming out of your television screen. Yeah. That could be.
Andy, you don't need a video recorder. You just put the tape in the air, and the recorder and the TV will form around it. That's how this course works.
I do feel sorry for poor old Sadako. I mean, she kind of like set her stall out so early, and now she's a bit fucked with the internet and that and everything. Imagine her pitching to Netflix. It's an absolute disaster.
On my side of things, I am just waiting for an Amazon and the Yes Asia delivery. I know we were talking about Yes Asia, but I am waiting for a Hong Kong
the only person who's still blind.
Yeah,
from
I'm amazed at that. Wow.
Because I did hear that they were having trouble. They was not delivering to the UK.
That's right. Yeah, because they're mainly focused on Yes style. No,
It's like, we have a video store. Okay. No. Don't stop it. Just keep it going. Just let me know when it's a problem.
What did you order?
I ordered Bridget Lynn's remastered version of her film from 1990, Red Dust, which I just spotted in the listings.
Yeah.
I still get those newsletters from Yes Asia, and they literally know my MO. They are like, hey Phil, here are 3 mainland Chinese films you are never going to watch, and the 3 lower ones are, this was all made before 2000. Go ahead and enjoy. So that's how I found out about Red Dust. And I am waiting for, I believe it is Film Movement who are releasing it in the United States. I am just waiting I'm just waiting for them to send me a copy of Center Stage with Maggie Kyung.
Classic.
Which
was done by our friend B.D. Chang's
Yes,
company,
that's true. Yes.
I imagine Vita Asia.
I wasn't going to try and pronounce it, but
yeah. We're going to have to get better at that for the next podcast.
That's very true. Yes, we will have to nail at least not insult it by saying it terrible.
That's all I'm waiting for at the moment. I'm just waiting for them to ship out. I am looking forward to seeing both of them because of the retrospective on Bridget Lynn that we were doing earlier in the year. I kind of, it's not I remembered Bridget Lynn, I just completely forgot that she had just this massive career, and there are so many films that never got an English language release, either in Hong Kong with English subtitles or anywhere else in the world that had English subtitles. So I'm taking the opportunity now that I have it, just to watch it to see what it was like.
I've never seen Red Dust. Yeah.
So that's it for now. Thanks to Phillip for joining us.
Thank you, guys.
And thanks for Fedor for making his debut on the programme.
Thank you for having me.
Our pleasure. Don't forget you can find all of our previous episodes on Apple, Amazon Music, Spotify, Google, or wherever you get your podcasts. Subscribe and you'll never miss an episode. But for now, there's only time to say cheers.
Cheers. Here's to you.
Cheers.
Cheers.